Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Tattoo Bart, and welcome back to the channel. In today's episode, we're gonna do a really new and cool technique video, kind of in a series of the Tattooing 101 again. We previously did some shading techniques, some color blending or color saturation techniques, and today we are gonna talk about shading, saturation, how to blend your shades, how to create a nice dimension in a piece. And ultimately, what we're going to do today, and it might look a little bit boring, but we're going to use this image right here uh, to really create depth in our piece. But first, we got to go a little bit step by step in how to actually approach a piece like that. So, we're going to have a look at the image, and I'm going to give you a couple of pointers that we're going to use. Now in this image you can see there is a whole lot of things going on. We're going to keep it very simple. We're just going to use the deep shadow, the midtone, and the highlight. But before we actually start on this piece, we're going to do things a little bit simpler. And I want to show you how to actually create these shades in your ink cap, because you're going to need at least 3 tones to create these shades and blend these out. So to keep things super easy, we're just going to use 3 ink caps and we're going to fill one up completely black, which is going to be our shadow, our dark tone. We're going to use a mid-tone, which is going to be a little bit less than half black. And we're going to have one ink cup that has just one ink drop. And of course, we're going to fill the rest up with our distilled water or shading solution to kind of mix these inks down. And we have 3 nice tones that we are going to use for our piece today. So now that we had a little bit of a look in how that image is actually built up and how the shades are built up, we're going to head over to the practice skin and kind of implement that sort of vision that we saw in the image and how we're going to break it down, and we're going to break it down on our practice skin. So let's dive down and let's get to it. So before we start to attack our circle, we first need to grab a pen, and we're gonna use this little square to actually start to practice and blending our shades. We're gonna divide this little rectangle in 3 pieces, just like so. You can also do this on your stencil, but I always like to hand draw them in. So the bottom is gonna be our dark tones, the middle is gonna be our mid tones, and the top are gonna be the light tones. For this piece, I'm gonna use my Wormhole Pro Flip Pen, which is a stroke adjustable machine. If you don't have a stroke adjustable machine or whatever, I will always recommend to use a machine somewhere between the 3.5mm to a 4mm stroke for shading. You can also use a larger stroke, but this is just easier if you are a beginner. Also, I always recommend to slow your machine down and don't stick your needle out so far, because you also get a very bad ink flow in some cases, and this will cause unnecessary damage onto the skin, even though we are just working on practice skin. Stick your needle in a little bit further, get a good ink flow, and slow your machine down. Now there's 2 ways to approach it. You can start with your dark tone and work your way up. We're not gonna do that. We're actually gonna start with our light tone and build our shades up. So we're gonna start really light, we're gonna go to our mid tones and then to our dark tones, and then we're kind of gonna go back and forth to blend out a little bit more. So we're gonna start with our lightest tone in the top, which is a little bit tricky because we just drew these on the practice skin, but just be careful whenever you're wiping so you don't wipe off your reference pretty much. And as you can see, I'm gonna start a little bit underneath the line where I actually want my blend to happen. Now why is that? Sometimes when you start your shade, you might push a little bit harder so that gets out a little bit darker. Now if you have that right on the edge of your where you want your light tone to be, it's very hard to blend that out and you might end up making your piece too dark. If you already start a little bit darker with the light section kind of halfway or a little bit into the mid-tone, it is a lot easier to blend out those little inconsistencies with your mid-tone later on. So right here we are gonna go to our mid-tone and we're gonna do pretty much the same thing. Start a little bit below that line where you want your blend to happen into your dark tone and slowly move up towards your light tone. Now this is the most crucial part because you do really need to saturate your mid-tones, because if you put them in too light, you're gonna be too light in your light tone. If you put them in too dark, they might collapse a little bit with your light tone, and of course we can always blend it into our dark tone, but your image might end up a lot darker than you actually want it to be. So it is very important to take your time and just slowly work these shades in. You can see how slow my hand movement is at the moment. Don't think you should or you could do it faster, because you will get faster at this once you are getting used to the technique and things like that. So always move very slowly and very softly over the skin. Don't start pushing harder. Don't increase your voltage. Just take your time, stay patient, and create these shades. Now you can see this part hasn't really blended out that smooth yet, and that's because I started a little bit too heavy on the light tone. So we're gonna grab our mid-tones and we're gonna blend this section out a little bit more by brushing over it. You could use a little bit of a faster hand movement because it is a shorter bit of skin that we're gonna work on. So you could use to go a little bit faster, or actually start packing a little bit over the two sections, like I showed in the previous episode. What we did with the color blending, you could do the same thing when you are blending out your black and gray shades, to actually pack that little bit of a medium or light tone in. But we're just going to softly build it up like that, and I'm actually going to switch to my light tone to blend that little inconsistency out a little bit more. So we're going to dip into our light tone, we're going to work a little bit higher and start blending again. And because we're gonna go back and forth so much, it is very important to slow your machine down and to go in really soft, because you don't want to overwork the skin before you can actually create your blend, because that blend is never gonna go in, or you're gonna damage the skin that much that pieces are gonna start ending up missing when the tattoo starts to heal, because they come off with the scabs and you get all sorts of patchy inconsistencies in your shade. So always go in really soft, go in really slow, and just take your time whenever you're blending your shades. And now we have done that, we're actually going to do the absolutely same thing with our dark tones. We're going to slowly brush in our dark tones and work our way up. Although I do like to pack in my dark tones a little bit heavier than building up with these shades, but first I want to build up so I can get a nice transition into my mid-tones before I start packing the whole thing black. But I will do that a little bit later on. Here you can see I am actually going to start packing in my solid black at the edges, up towards where you kind of see that overlapping bit where the shading looks a little bit darker and the blend is not super smooth yet. So I'm gonna blend up to that part, or actually pack in my black up to that part, and then I'm gonna use a little bit of a faster packing movement to kind of take that line out. It's kind of like a barber that is blending hair, and this is where a lot of people go wrong, because they think that this is the way to actually shade, and you're gonna work way too fast. And these are just techniques to blend out little bits at a time, and don't shade as fast as this, because it's actually a lot of build up before, and then this is just to blend out the last bits. I am gonna go back to my mid-tone just a little bit to blend a little bit more in between the dark and the light tones. And I'm gonna use the exact same technique just to blend everything out super smooth, so you don't see any hard lines between your shadings or your different tones. And once we are satisfied, we are going to do the same thing for the circle. We're gonna divide it in 3 again, so we're gonna pretty much highlight where our light tones are going to be, and we're gonna make a little line where we're gonna divide our dark tones from our midtones, and it's pretty much the same process all over again. I am gonna speed up this video a little bit just so this video doesn't get too long, but here and there I am going to give a couple of pointers if there is anything special going on. So once you've divided this in the way you want it to go, we are gonna start. In this piece, I am going to start with my dark tones, just so I can create a nice line in the bottom and I keep my shape a little bit better, because this is gonna take a little bit longer than the little rectangular shape that we did before. So I wanna start with my dark tones to really get that bottom line in and have that base of my shape pretty much before I start to move and go into my next tones. So it is even more important when you start with your dark tones to start very light and very soft and brush in those darker tones before you move on to your midtones. So right here I'm just gonna go over the bottom line a little bit and kind of get a feel for the shape of the design, and with my magnum on the angle I'm barely touching that line and slowly and softly passing over it. Make sure not to wipe off my stencil whenever I'm taking away some excess ink, and just sort of get a feel for the design, get my first base in, which is pretty boring, so we're probably gonna skip ahead and move on to the midtones. So with the midtones we are pretty much doing the same, and I always like to work a little bit in the direction of your design. So if it's a circle like this, you kind of make half circle-ish shapes when you're whipping out your shading, and you kind of do this throughout the whole piece. This will just give a much better effect whenever your piece is done, and you just work with the shape. If you want that oval or like that circular shape, you're gonna use that motion to get your shading across. And again, just take your time, go in very soft and blend out these shades throughout the whole piece. Now one thing I did not do, and you'll probably see that a little bit later, is when you're working from dark to light and you're gonna switch over to a lighter tone, always make sure you really clean your needle before you move to a lighter tone. I unfortunately didn't really do that, so you will see that this particular part of the design is going to be a little bit darker in the end. It's not the biggest deal, but whenever you're doing this on a larger scale project, you do want to make sure you clean out your needle when you are moving from a darker to a lighter tone. So this is a kind of a sorry way to learn, but it's a way to learn. Make sure you don't make that mistake yourself. So just to blend a little bit of our midtones out into our light tones, I'm gonna use my light tone and just go over the edge just a little bit to blend that midtone out a little bit smoother into our highlight, which is pretty much gonna be open skin whenever you're using this in a tattoo. You always wanna keep a little bit of skin visible. You can of course use some white for highlights as well, but try to keep those at a minimum, or use them kind of to keep skin open that is not gonna stay open once the tattoo gets older. Also, I did think that my bottom part was not dark enough at all, so I'm gonna go back with my dark tone and kind of touch up that bottom part a bit so it really stands out from the rest of the tattoo, and just to create a little bit more contrast, because contrast is always key in a tattoo. I'm just gonna use a simple whip shade and pack a little bit on the bottom just to get that dark tone in a lot darker so we can get a nice contrast in our piece. So I hope you really enjoyed watching this video and that you learned something from it. Now, of course, on practice skin, it is always a little bit more difficult to get these shades in super smooth, and especially with the light tones. And this is a very hard and cheap practice skin. So, of course, when you are on real skin, it might go a little bit faster, but the most important thing is to stay really patient whenever you are shading. Don't rush it, because this is where your shading is going to be patchy or not as smooth as you want it to be. Just stay focused, relax. Like, for example, the little bow, I know I probably sped up a little bit to make this video a little bit more interesting, but in real time, to just do that little circle that was literally only this big to shade it, I took about 15 to 20 minutes to do that. And I think I should actually spend a bit more time on it to get these blends in even smoother. Just to put things in perspective, it is very easy to spend half an hour on a little circle like that just to get all these blends in smooth on practice skin. Now, on real skin, it might take you a little bit less, 15 or 20 minutes. But the most important thing is to stay focused, to take your time to get these smooths and shapes in as perfect as possible. Because on real skin, it is a little bit less forgiving. So it has to be in perfect at all times. And that's why it's super important to go slow and to go in soft, so you can always build up, go back on the first spot where you started to darken things up. Use your mid-tones or your light tones to really get these blends in the right place. So go in soft so you can go over multiple times without damaging the skin too much. So always, yeah, always do that. Just go slow and go soft whenever you're black and gray shading. Um, yeah, I really hope you learned something from this video. Now, I really want your guys and girls input on what you want to see on a next episode, because I know there's a lot of people that want to learn certain techniques, certain things, but I don't know what you guys want, and I want to pretty much make the videos that you want to see. So let me know what you want to see in a future video on techniques, on whatever. Just let me know in the comments down below, and of course subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And other than that, I don't have a whole lot more to say, other than I wish you all a wonderful day. Make sure you keep practicing, and I will see you in the next video.